must look backwards. We must look backwards. We must look backwards.
Under Donald Ramatar presidency, it will be better tomorrow.
Hey, are you ready for victory? Let me see your hands. Put them up, put the cup in the air. Oh, come raise it up now. From strength to strength, we're moving with the PPPC. What's in my cup? Stays in my cup. In my cup stays. Hey, are you ready for victory? Let me see your hands. Put them up, put the cup in the air. Oh, come raise it up now. From strength to strength, we're moving with the PPPC.
Basically deal with something I can only call or label as repulsive and barbaric. It happened last evening at one of our meetings in Victoria. I will ask Minister Robert Prasad give you some brief remarks, and then we will take questions from the media. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members of the media and activists and supporters. First of all, as we would all recall, that on November 11th, all political parties committed themselves to a code of conduct for the contesting of the 2011 general and regional elections. And contained therein were 9 principles, or what we want to consider 9 areas of commitment. And number 5, and also importantly number 2, we should start at number 2 of that, state that our party's opposition to and rejection of the use of violence and intimidation or plans of this nature by our candidates, agents, members, or supporters as a means of expressing political support or furthering political objectives. That's number 2 principle in the Code of Conduct. And from the PPPC standpoint, it's a very important principle because we believe that the use of violence and intimidation is not conducive for the holding of free, fair, and civil elections. In fact, it is not acceptable behavior in a modern and civilized society. And we want to state that last night we saw a clear breach, infringement of this code of conduct by persons representing the opposition, and particularly the APNU, PNC, now APNU, whereby we were holding, as we're doing across the country, a public meeting at Victoria Primary School Square that started at 6 o'clock. And the 2 main speakers were former PNC Member of Parliament Joe Hamilton and also Attorney at Law Anil Nandalal. And during the course of that meeting, as you will hear from the victims themselves, persons who were attacked, during the course of that meeting, persons were brought in, they were transported at the meeting site with a clear intention and objective of instigating and clearly perpetuating violence. We have raised this with the Guyana Police Force, and we do expect that the Guyana Police Force will be very quick and comprehensive in its investigation and ensure that the perpetrators are brought to justice. We are in the process of raising this matter with the Guyana Elections Commission, the international observers, the local observers, and all and sundry that are involved in this process. Why is it that our supporters and activists who are conducting a very peaceful public meeting, persons had to be brought into Victoria? And I want to say that this is not an action by the people of Victoria, but persons were brought there, transported there, with a clear and sole intention of carrying out violence against the people of Victoria and residents of Victoria who are supporting the PPP Civic. And this is certainly interesting too, because at that very moment, we had the leader or the presidential candidate of APNU at another forum talking about what his party would do for law and order and security in the country. And at the same time, we see the centrally directed violence and gang being sent to Victoria to perpetuate this type of madness. Again, it shows clearly that sometimes what we hear people say, they don't, as it were, walk the walk, but to say the nice things and associate themselves with persons who would want to create the impression that they are all for law and order, security, and for true and functioning democracy. And at the end of the day, on another account, this is what they carry out. And again, the People's Progressive Party Civic, we would want to highlight this development. We want to call on all parties, all responsible stakeholders to condemn the violence and the action against our activists, our supporters. We've seen it at Buxton. We saw it in nomination day. We've seen other elements of it. But we thought that with the signing of the Code of Conduct, at least there would have been some level of restraint. At least there would be some level of decency. At least there would be some level of commitment to democratic and free electioneering. Meetings are held all across, whether it's considered your support base or not, and people ought to be free to conduct. Just yesterday, last evening, one of the opposition party went exactly to the site that we had our massive rally at Stortville. No one troubled them, no one intimidated them. I mean, they had but 10 or 12 persons, it's all right. But no one, because we all must feel free to go and to campaign and to have meetings done. And that is what is provided for in the Constitution. And that is how we should behave in an enlightened and in a modern way. And it's very sad that APNU, now it calls itself, is continuing to be more of the same old PNC type of behavior. And again, we need to register that point. Another issue before I invite the comrades here to speak about their traumatic and violent experience, I want to raise another issue of concern away from this type of matter. But also we see the attempts by the opposition to abuse the use of proxy. And we have an instance which was sent to the Guyana Elections Commission that took place in Berbice, whereby a group of opposition activists, headed in fact by a senior officer in the New Amsterdam Town Council, 2 senior officers, visited the old people's home there, what we call the Dharamshala at Fort Kanji, and told residents that they were there on behalf of GCOM. And they had questioned whether they had registered and these persons had collected their ID card. Then these individuals who said they were from GCOM, posing as GCOM officers, proceeded to request of these older folks to sign the blue proxy forms under the pretext that their ID card, that they were signing for ID cards. So this type of behavior in this incident, again, we have brought it to the attention of GCOM, and we must not in any way try to infringe, try to affect the smooth and effective functioning of our elections. The third issue, too, is that we have been receiving lots of reports of persons trying to manipulate voters through cash inducements and otherwise. We've had persons coming here to Freedom House reporting what has been taking place. And in fact, we've had instances where persons were told to come to Freedom House to collect money, where they were sent by, I'm quite sure, opposition elements. Persons want to instigate problems. And so you have this level of confusion too now getting into the picture, which I think is not helpful for the holding of free, fair, and smooth elections in this regard. Those are just some of the issues I want to flag at this time. Before I invite the comrades, and perhaps I'll start with this comrade, because he was the individual who was doused with kerosene last evening at Buxton, and I'll ask him to relate, Victoria, I'll ask him to relate his experience.
Yesterday evening at Victoria, where myself and colleagues were there at a meeting by the PPPC. As their supporters, we were there standing peacefully as Comrade Joe Forrest was introduced to the podium as the first speaker. And while we were there standing, a set of children, middle-aged persons, and toddlers they brought with them. They were way passing, chanting, "We want Granger." The photograph of Mr. Granger, "We want Granger, we want Granger." We were there standing very peacefully, saying nothing to no one. And at the end of that meeting, we leave to go and take our transportation back to home, where while coming through, while we were standing there, a minibus came up, stopped at the road front, and a set of young people emerged from the bus, straight in our direction, start attacking us brutally. They had things like baseball bats, bricks were pelting, bottles were thrown at us, sticks were thrown at us. So as I was getting out of the crowd, there was one big woman in her early 60s standing with a cap pulled down on her nose with a little child holding up in front of her. The child was about 8 or 9 years old with a bottle in his hand. And as I was passing, dosed me the whole bottle of kerosene from this left side right down. At that time, I became the main target because I was wearing the jersey with the logo. After finished dosing me, I started to run because there were another group coming with fire and a poster, a placard with Mr. Ramatar placard with fire. So I became scared. I started to run because I don't know what would have happened next. If they were coming to light me a fire. So I started to run for safety. So after finishing running out on the road, turning east to get away from the crowd, the crowd keep advancing and advancing. And after advancing to us, we heard an explosion whereby the crowd dispersed. The police then come and take us to Kubanjan police station, where they were harassing us while we were there. Told us that we are some liar. Nobody's even been attacked us. Excuse me. And all these kind of things.
Last evening, I was at Victoria with some of the comrades at the PPPC meeting. While the meeting was in progress, we started hearing chants, people calling out Granger, Granger, and pelting bottles and bricks. The meeting was forced to come to an end. We left, and as we were going home, on our way home, we saw a set of persons emerge from a minibus. They were children and elderly persons. They started advancing towards us, hollering Granger, Granger. They threw a bottle of Kero on this guy. I started receiving a set of pelts, bricks, bottles. We head east, and the police came up, took us to the station, took reports from us, and that was it.
Yes, last evening I was at Victoria attending one of PPP meeting where myself, while in the process of the meeting, right, that Comrade Nandala was speaking about was thrown at him, but it didn't hit, I don't know if it hit him, but it was thrown at him, and the meeting was forced to come to a halt. And as the meeting come to halt, the police then escort Nandala to his vehicle, and as he go away, the crowd, every meeting to know that we started to follow. Myself and my colleague was walking, my friend was walking, and a woman came up and showed some care, and he ran away from me, and I just lay between the crowd. And after we went to the crowd, they had awkward Victoria. I don't know where, I see them back. How they move away from me, and I come to them and go up on the stairs. I hear explosion go out. I don't know where it come from. But the police then come up and take them away. I see when the police come and take them away in the car. I leave standing on the road. And while standing on the road, a group of people circle me and start like talking to me. One cuff me on my shoulder, pulling me. You old fool, you still drink a while, you don't go and mind your grandchildren. You're a police slave and things like that, hauling for grains. And I was so quickly rescued by a policewoman who pulled me up the horse. Said, come, I want you with me. She put me in a police vehicle and take me to the Copeland John's police station where I had to give a statement there. And then we get away.
Now invite the media to ask any questions that you may have.
Minister, under the current code of conduct, what implications this type of behavior warrants?
Well, because it is not a legally binding document, it is one in which there is some level of self-regulation, where it has to be self-implementation. I'm not sure whether legally penalties or any other such action can be taken, but one would expect if parties that want to govern this country would publicly sign a document committing to certain principles, and if they're going to be breached in this flagrant and this disgraceful way, I'm quite sure it tells the wider public the nature, the character, and the lack of trust one should have in that political party. At the end of the day, as I said, it's not a legally binding document, but if you put your signature and you've affixed it, and you've done so publicly, and you've given these commitments, and then you have the violations taking place in this most dastardly manner, I'm quite sure the wider public will now understand the true nature, and perhaps whatever you say or whatever you preach, perhaps people will have to take it with not a grain of salt, sometimes even a bucket of salt in this regard.
This is not the first time that this particular group is disrupting meetings of the PPPC. It was reported to the police before. Has the police made any headway in arresting anyone?
Well, we would expect that the Guyana Police Force would be very strident and, as I said, comprehensive in its investigation and ensure that perpetrators of this act, notwithstanding what political persuasion they come from, because if we find our supporters engaging in anything close to this too, we would similarly condemn. And we've made it quite clear. Last night, myself and other leaders had to be urging supporters to exercise restraint, urging people not to be provoked, urging people not to fall into this trap of disruption. We had to be calling up activists because people on the East Coast were angry. Activists in Victoria and elsewhere were angry to see what was taking place before the public glare. And so we had to restrain, and now we've made it clear to our supporters not to be provoked and allow the law enforcement agencies in this regard. But we do expect that the Guyana Police Force would be very firm, and we also expect to hear from GCOM and civil society and all the groups, the chattering class in Guyana. We hope that they would be very vocal too in their condemnation of this dastardly act.
One of the things, last night we got a report that the meeting was over, that the police escorted Anil Nandlal and a man to Nandlal's vehicle, that the man decided that he was going to turn back. The initial suggestion is that he didn't anticipate a threat. Then we heard something happened, and this man discharged 2 rounds. Has the party been able to identify the man who discharged the rounds, or can any of these comrades here say whether they saw or they know the man who would have discharged the 2 rounds?
Well, we're not, as it were, investigators, and they have provided the necessary statements to the Guyana Police Force last night. You've heard, but we brought them here to say they were there. You've heard from somebody, and you hear all kinds of stories. I see this new website that they have running around, One Life, One Voice, something, already starting the machinery. The machine is out there to misrepresent and to make these comrades here, who are the victims, to make them the aggressors. This is what is going on. And it started from last night, and I know that, and when I saw your account of it, I already saw that being weaved into, to make them the aggressors. No, yeah, but we wanted to ensure that the truth prevailed. The truth, whether who discharged a firearm or not, let the police determine that. I'm not sure whether the police did, somebody from the resident, I'm not going to get involved in that.
Sir,
The fact,
if they are aware, if they saw,
well, I would allow them to give whatever this matter in terms to the police. They're here to talk about their experience in this regard. I think one of the individuals here said they heard a shot, so they didn't see. Explosion or something, an explosion. So they already accounted. They didn't see, but they heard, because a lot of people were going home after the pelting and the meeting had to be terminated. Then they decided to pounce on the activists who they consider lead activists of the People's Progressive Party Civic. But please, these are mothers, these are people, grandmothers, these are fathers, these are and others. This is just a sample that they were attacked. And they were attacked. Let's now try to swing them in for propagandistic purpose to make them the aggressors. And we want to illustrate that fact, because I know the machine is out there. I saw the traffic that is taking place. The racism, of course, they've tried to inject racism in it. Probably they did not know who it is that really was attacked, so they tried to give a spin as if it was perhaps Indo-Guyanese who were attacked there. Then they also now try to make as if these comrades, look at these comrades, these people can go and beat up anybody in Victoria from their village.
I just want the media to know that these things are real. Activists from the ACNU and PNC, they are getting people within the community to come in there and harass people. These things are for real. Last Saturday morning, 1:30, a group of about 12, they were coming from a wake, came to my home, chanting, telling me the cop got a hole and all thing, threatening to burn my home and kill me and harm my children. I went to the station. The police told me if I couldn't go to the station at 1:30 in the morning. These things are for real. All when you walk in the colony or Ramatar, all things. Why we cannot exercise our democratic right freely? I don't want the media to get this wrong. These things are for real. They're not going to say what happened. They are bringing in other persons too in the community to harass people.
What response are you anticipating from GCOM, since you said the document is more self-regulatory than a legally binding one?
At a minimum, condemnation. At a minimum. But I would not want to dictate to GCOM what it should not do. But I think because this document was conceived, a document was promulgated, a document signing that was facilitated by GCOM, GCOM has some ownership over it, over the process too. And we expect that GCOM will be very, very clear and unambiguous in its comment on this matter, because we are 11 days away from elections. These are the things that we do not need. These are the things we do not need in a modern environment. Let us not go back to the past. Let us look to the future. We're talking elections in 2011 are about the future, are about the future of this country, about development. Elections are about modernization. Elections are about taking the country forward. Those are what elections are about. Elections should not be seen as an occasion for persons to be involved in behavior that is destructive and that will, in a way, affect national development and national unity.
question, sir. Police presence at these meetings, these comrades were there. would any of them say whether there was adequate police presence at the meeting to begin with? And could they say at what stage did the police leave? Because I heard the comrades talk about police patrol coming up to rescue, which would suggest that there were no police on the ground.
Police were there, but the police them weren't doing anything. One police officer just came and talked to the crowd, stopped pelting when the bottle started shying, and when the bottle barely shadow Mr. Nandalal. That's when the police officer, they had neighborhood police there too. They were just standing on the road in the mix of the meeting. Why the comrade said the police came to rescue her? The police, they were behind the crowd. Some of the police were behind the crowd that was attacking us. So when they heard the noise and the explosion, this is when the police came forward.
I think we don't want to create the impression here that the police did not do anything. And as you've heard from the account, the police would have their own SOPs, and it is up to the Minister of Home Affairs, the Commissioner of Police, for them to look and to examine whether or not the SOP that has been given, whether it's been followed, not our role here. So I don't want us to judge whether the police acted or was in a way inactive in terms of how it could have prevented this. But certainly I'm quite sure that the police would use this as an opportunity to review whether or not its ranks were acted in a way and could have done anything to have prevented. But I don't want us to cast judgment. At this point in time, it is an act that no one should encourage. I expect Granger, I expect Trotman and Ramjatan today, without any equivocation, to condemn this if they are serious about law and order and peaceful elections. If to do otherwise, it will tell the wider public truly who they are.
Last night's incident was not the first time that a meeting was disrupted. Do you think that this would intimidate voters come November 20th?
Actually, it would have the opposite effect. It would strengthen the will of people. In Guyana, we've had many episodes in our past, and we have always seen that the overwhelming majority, the 99.5% or more of Guyanese, they don't tolerate this nonsense. They don't want to be part of this type of behavior. And how they respond is that they respond by ensuring that the process goes ahead, that they come out and vote in day, and they exercise that right. And the best response any law-abiding and patriotic Guyanese can give to this is to ensure that we do not descend, we're not intimidated, we're not provoked, we maintain calm, and we also keep our eyes on the important goal. And that important goal is to ensure that on elections day, the elections are conducted in a very free and peaceful manner, where every single citizen of this land will have the opportunity. And for the PPP Civic, I want to say, this will not intimidate our supporters. This will not cow our supporters. In fact, this will energize them to ensure that the PPP Civic remains in office, because it tells us what the alternatives are. You don't have to wait to see what happened. We had a history of 28 years. We saw episodes of violence in previous elections. This is merely a reminder of, should we allow those parties in government, what will happen to this country. And I think that is what it reinforces in the minds of Guyanese. And more so, people, even those who are willing to say, let's give him a chance. Let's give them, they got a new name. They dress up differently now. People will say, the leopard still has its spots, not going anywhere.
As the party had a discussion with Kwame McCoy about his supposed violent retaliation in the face of quote-unquote aggression.
I've dealt with that 2 days ago, and to say that we, in fact, did meet anyone. If you turn up to Freedom House or you call anyone, and you point an individual, the first thing we do, we call that individual and say the following allegations have been made. We are also aware that the Guyana Police Force too is investigating that matter. So we take these matters very, very seriously. In fact, we've developed our own standard operating procedure when we have our activists on the road, what they should do, what they should call back. That is why at that moment we were able to manage the situation. because of the mechanism that people have. Something happens, you know, you call for direction, you don't get yourself involved, you don't allow the situation to deteriorate. So we have those protocols devised, and which we try to manage and manage well as much as possible.
Your manifesto has come in for severe criticisms from the opposition. How would you respond to these criticisms?
Well, first of all, many of those who have criticized have not yet produced a manifesto. And as I've said sometime before, this manifesto is very inclusive, it's very forward-looking, it's very visionary, and I'm quite sure the opposition would have read with much delight that there's a role for them to play too, and a real role for all Guyanese to be part of it, and that certainly would be one of the reasons why it has attracted so much attention. But this manifesto is clearly about taking the country forward, about looking at diversifying our national economy, creating more jobs, ensuring that we have a modern and effective education system, that the social sectors are there, that we put Guyana in a place whereby it can continue to ride the rough waters of what's taking place in terms of internationally. We see the financial collapse that has taken place. Guyana, I was speaking yesterday even to an international bank. Guyana is the only country where banks make money now, where banks are making money. We're the only country where we're able to increase wages and not decrease wages. The only country where there's stability in foreign exchange. The only country where you see more jobs are being created rather than where people are losing jobs. And that goes to the United States, where you have unemployment at 14 million persons unemployed. You have up close to 46 million people on the breadline. In Europe, we know what's taking place there now. What's happening in Greece, what's happening in Italy, what's taking place in Portugal, in Spain, what happened in the UK, where they had to throw up VAT, increase VAT, and also reduce employment, 540,000 people within the public sector. And if you see what's happening in Guyana, it's a different story. And this manifesto is not only about continuity, but it's also about expanding and enhancing those conditions and the environment that we have for prosperity for all the people. And at the end of the day, about forging unity, where every single Guyanese can look forward to being part of this national project that we call a better and brighter Guyana.
Minister, given the attacks and the disruption at your meetings, will the party be taking any precautions at upcoming meetings?
Well, we always do, but we always do at those meetings, and we do expect that the Guyana Police Force, which is the agency responsible for security, would in fact be much more proactive. But at the same time, we would have to look at our own internal arrangements, which we have been doing from time to time, especially in some areas where we believe that persons may, or these groups that are instigating it, may want to bring persons to disrupt those meetings. But it goes with all the preparation and the planning. But persons ought not to be intimidated. I'm quite sure these individuals who carried out the act are known, they're well known, and we expect that they will be dealt with in accordance with the laws of Guyana.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. No matter what the name, this is what the APNU offers Guyana. This is what they want you to vote for. But we all remember too well what this represents.
We must look backwards.
Guyana says, never again. In 1992, 98% of what Guyana earned went to repay debts. The country was bankrupt. Infrastructure was dilapidated. The country was in shambles. From being the breadbasket of the region, Guyana had been relegated to one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. Even worse, Guyanese had been denied the right to free and fair elections for decades. Today, debt service ratio is down to only 4%. The country is booming again. We are the envy of the region, with strong economic growth for successive years, despite a global recession. And Guyana is poised to take off to even greater heights.
Together with the